everybody, it's Romania Black, and I'm really sad because we only have 2 episodes left of season 2 of Vinland Saga, and I don't want it to end. No, I mean, what if Mappa surprises all of us and they're like, surprise, we've been working on season 3 this whole time, here it is in like 5 months. Kind of like what Bones is doing with Bungo Stray Dogs. I would be elated. I'd be like, thank you, Mappa, for surprising us with the best surprise of all surprises. But yeah, I'm going to be really sad because someone brought it to light that it took them 4 years to make season 2 of Vinland Saga. And I was like, ooh, I got very lucky with starting Vinland Saga right as season 2 was about to come out. I got very lucky and I was like, dang it. So now I get to join you all in a couple weeks as my watch will begin and I will start my long awaiting for season 3 of Vinland Saga. I feel pretty confident they're gonna make a season 3. I feel like this trended enough in Japan and has enough rolling press that people are gonna want to see season 3. I guess it may depend on how they end this season, whether or not there's a segue. I mean, season 1 ended pretty damn good to where you wanted a segue. You're like, well, I want to know what happens now. And so that really got you excited for season 2. So I'm hoping that this season has like a season 3 kind of little tease to get you really excited for what's to come and then leave you hanging. That's what I'm hoping for. But I don't know. It seems like everything's kind of, on the one hand, it seems like it's winding down, but then on the other hand, we still don't really have a resolution about Kettle's farm and what Einar and Thorfinn are going to do, so there's a lot up in the air, right? But man, last episode is my favorite of the season. I freaking loved that episode. I gushed about it. I like Thorfinn. He has my heart and soul. I'm like, here you go. Do what you want with this. And I would gladly follow the Congregation of the True Warriors. Absolutely. Would 100% follow it. But we have a lot of comments, so I'm not going to waste any more time. Wushin Sweebian talked about how Canute explaining with the waves is an actual real life event, which is pretty cool historically. And the idea being that he has no control over the elements and that secular power is in vain compared to the power of God. But that's why Canute is the king of the rebellion. He's going to rebel against God and see how that goes. But it's so funny, we're talking in the Discord, there's times where Canute seems very serious and there's times where he's being very sarcastic. And that's kind of what I love about his character is you can't fully tell how much is put on as an act, how much he's fooling the Danes, how much he's fooling himself, and what is truly true. Canute's a very fascinating creature because of that. He's very similar, as I've talked in the reactions and the discussions, to Light Yagami from Death Note. He's a very interesting character in that regard, right? Blue pointed out, could a king have no enemies? They were kind of playing devil's advocate because Einar, came out and had this big thing being like, what the fudge are you doing? And Thorfinn has the whole I have no enemies argument. And Blue is kind of playing devil's advocate for Canute, saying, well, he's a king, so can a king not have enemies? And I think to that, I would say that's kind of the point. That it almost seems like Thorfinn saying, there shouldn't be kings. It's like, I think Thorfinn's point is getting at, like, when you are a king, yeah, you're supposed to rule, but the paradise that Canute supposedly wanted is one where people wouldn't suffer. And under a king, someone's going to suffer. So is Thorfinn suggesting a revolt? Is Thorfinn suggesting a revolution or a land where there is no king? I mean, if you think about Thor's in Iceland, where they lived, there wasn't like a town mayor or anything. Everybody was just kind of like hanging out and having their own deal. And they came to Thor's for advice, but that was pretty much it. So what do we do with that? So it almost seems like Thorfinn suggesting that, well, yeah, you don't need any enemies. And it seems like the story is suggesting monarchies create enemies. So don't have a monarchy. It almost seems like what Yukimura is suggesting, where he's like, democracy. Which we know as the audience that's not exactly going to happen in this timeline at this point, but it's funny that that's kind of what the mangaka is suggesting, like, well, maybe you shouldn't have a monarchy and then you won't have that problem, But we'll see, we'll get there, right? Little Dude talked about how the love Einar had for Arnheid. We talked about that in the comments, that it was a true love. And I absolutely agree. Because Einar, the phrase, if you love someone, let them go. Einar did that. He loved her. And it wasn't just something sexual or romantic. That wasn't it at all. It was the idea that he loved her unconditionally. He wanted to understand her. He related to her. He cared about her. He respected her. And he loved her so much that when he saw that her husband came back, rather than being someone possessive or jealous like Kettle, who says he loves her but doesn't really, he lets her go because that's her husband. That's who she's supposed to be with. And I thought that was beautiful. I loved that so much. And it just, I love the idea that Einar's, his emotions were so pure. It was beautiful. And it's kind of like more than just the friendship that Thorfinn had with Arnheid, because I think what Arnheid and Thorfinn had was just a friendship. And for Einar, there's a little bit more to it, which I really, really like. There's a kindness and understanding. Killer Queen 2000 talked about how Olmar is better written than Usopp, is a better written Usopp from One Piece. I laughed for a solid minute because I was like, yeah, kind of. I'm not the biggest Usopp fan from One Piece. I'm not the biggest Usopp fan, but the fact that Olmar is a better written Usopp is freaking hilarious, and I love it so much. And Canute may be a hypocrite, but he's consistent with his goals and how he's going about it. I would agree. I feel like there's a lot of holes that you can make with Canute's argument of what one should do. There's a lot of holes there. However, Canute, you have to respect the guy. He has a mission. He has a vision. He's doing his darndest to achieve it. It's just, you know, do we agree with that mission or not? That is the question. So I thought that was really good. Omaru suggested that aside from Canute giving off the light Yagami vibes, which he definitely does, both men see the world is not how they want it. Yes, both of them are seeking to change the world in their own ways. Canute meets the idea of religion, because Canute meets the idea of God and religion with disdain and anger and tries to control to change his future. Whereas Thorfinn, I feel like he accepts what's going on. I feel like there's this difference here where Canute gets angry. He's like, I don't like the way the world is. I don't like how God's looking down on us. I want to change that. And he meets that with anger and disdain, right? And he's like, well, then if I take control and I'm in charge, then I can change things. Whereas Thorfinn, he accepts, he's like, yeah, the world's not how I want it. It's not the way it should be. But he decides to change himself and influence others in small ways that can maybe change their mindset. And I'm not even sure if Thorfinn is aware of it, but he is influencing others, right? Whether he's realizing it or not. I think the whole scene with the men watching him take the 100 punches in the last episode is emblematic of that. I feel like Canute's not trying necessarily to change himself. He's trying to change everyone around him. Whereas Thorfinn's like, if I change myself, then it will radiate and everyone will change because of that. So there's a different way that they're going about it, and it's really, really interesting. Omaru also suggested that Drot is what Olmar would have become if he'd become the warrior that Thorgal wanted him to be. I don't think he would have been as ripped as Drot. But I do like that idea. I like that idea that Olmar, if he had continued on the path, if Olmar was who Thorgal thought he was, he may have become Drot. I feel like that's a really good comparison. I think that Thorgil has been Thorgil's not the best judge of character. That's something that comes out because he thinks his father's this big brave man, Iron Fist Kettle, and we the audience know he is most certainly not. And he thought that his brother was like going to be all about the battles when, like, sure, granted, Olmar, before the man was killed, before the guy had the metal go through his eye, was sure all about becoming a warrior, all about going into battle. But the moment he got in that battle, ever since then, Olmar's been like, nixed, we experienced that, we didn't like it. And Thorgal just didn't seem to pick up the social cue from his brother that he was probably uncomfortable with all of this post-battle and thought he was just even more on board. And it's like, no, read the room, Thorgal. And he's just not the best judge of character, I don't think. I don't think he's the best judge. And then Alexander Q, finally, talks about how the farmer who lost his hands and told Olmar to take care of his daughters, that could have very well been the farmer at the beginning of season 2 that Olmar was sleeping with the daughter, that they were trying to get her hooked up with him. And I was like, oh my gosh, yes. That's like a great, like, coming full circle moment, right? I really, really loved that. And then Olmar, like, just coming full circle with the daughters by the end of it. So yeah, I've talked for a good 10 minutes. But yeah, I'm really excited, y'all. I'm very, very sad that we only have this episode next week. It's really bad. I've still got a poll that's been going on. If you're watching this on Patreon, it's on till Thursday. If you're watching this on YouTube, then it's too late. But hopefully a show that wins will do a good job taking its place for now. At least to tide me over until we see future shows and hopefully Vinland Saga Season 3. But we'll talk about all that next week and get into that. So I hope you all enjoy this reaction discussion. I'm super excited about it. I hope you all are 2. But we're not going to waste any more time. We're going to dive right in to Vinland Saga episode 23. And what could we get? We got 2 more episodes. It's the penultimate episode. We're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1. And let's do this, y'all. Mwah. Mwah. Peak Vinland Saga. Peak anime. Peak philosophical discussions. Peak everything. We love to see it. Peak anime. Ha 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 ha. We have 1 episode left. We have 1 episode left. I was like, wow, we're really wrapping a lot of things up in this episode, and we got 1 left to go. So what we doing? I usually don't check previews because I want to come into the episode blind next week, but I'm like, I mean, at this point, there's lots of things that they could do with the season to tell, like, what do we do from here? I mean, obviously, I feel like the last episode, it's a very different vibe from season 1, right? Season 1, oh my god. I mean, I guess we should talk that. I have Canute up here, I have Thorfinn up here, and I got the concepts, and I guess we should also put just like an other to talk about. But what I love is kind of if you have season 1 versus season 2 over here, right? And in the penultimate episode of season 1, we had a conflict. The conflict was between the gathering of Swin and Askeladd and Canute and Thorkel and all the men. The gathering, here's the thing, the conflict was a gathering, a meeting to discuss various things, but it's also like a coronation of sorts. And you have a conflict in season 2 that also deals with a gathering, right? And in both situations, season 1 and season 2, you have Canute and, well, Thorfinn, I would say Thorfinn's involved, but Thorfinn in season 1 doesn't get involved till the very end, right when Askeladd dies. Here, Thorfinn's been involved throughout the whole thing. But you have a conflict between the gathering of a king and someone who takes issue with him. It's the exact same situation, even though Swin would kindly say that Canute's not a king yet. Well, get out of here, talking head. And so we have a king and then someone that has an issue with them. In season 1, Canute had the issue with his father. Season 2, Thorfinn has the issue with Canute. And so you have this gathering. Soldiers are there. People are there. Everybody's watching. There's a negotiation. There's a conflict. There's an argument. And how does each season resolve that? Well, season 1's resolution is that Askeladd takes his revenge, essentially, or helps to get revenge on the Danes by taking out the king and putting Canute in control. And it's a violent bloodbath where people die. The king is beheaded. Askeladd ends up dying. Canute takes over the throne. Here, it is the situation where Thorfinn makes his claim, and when it's not met by Canute seriously, he decides to run. He says that I'm going to go. And that's kind of the thing, because back in season 1, Sven was not going to budge, and it's like, and Sven kind of made the same proclamation that Canute makes to Thorfinn. He's like, well, if you want to stop me, you're going to have to go through me. And Askeladd and Canute went through him. And here Thorfinn's like, nah, I'm going to go then. Okay, bye. He's like, I can see this is a losing battle for everybody, so peace out. It's a total 180, a complete reversal. And yet, here's the thing. In the moment in season 1 is the moment that Askeladd chops Swin's head off, an insanely hype moment that just jaw-dropping, and you're like, oh my god, what a badass crazy moment. Yeah. But, what does that give us as the audience in return? Askeladd dies, Thorfinn's taken prisoner and sold into slavery. Canute gets a cut and seems very melancholy about the whole business as Thorkel tells him, like, put on a good face, you're the king now. It feels so much more satisfying in this season when Thorfinn's like, yeah, I'm not going to fight you. And no, you're wasting my time. Like, that felt like, even though the moment where that guy chopping Sven's head off was so hype, and I was screaming at the time and shocked beyond all belief, this was so much more satisfying. This was like, no, I love how Thorfinn stuck to his guns. He stuck to his principles. He did not back down. He was just like, fine, then I'll leave. And that's kind of like such growth for Thorfinn, because in season 1, Thorfinn, he never ran. Thorfinn was like, you want me to run? No. But here Thorfinn is like, he doesn't want the conflict to continue. And unlike Thorgal and Kettle, who kind of get a little bit disillusioned as to what they're capable of, Thorfinn's like, I know I can't take you. He's like, fight your soldiers? No. He's like, hell no. And it's kind of going back to what Omar did when he was like, it takes courage to realize your situation and realize what needs to be done and to be able to act upon it. Omar's like, that's what takes courage, is to realize the situation you're in and do the right thing. And Thorfinn's like, I am not going to be able to fight you. I don't want to fight you. So the only thing I can do, if you're not going to come to terms and come to the table and talk and be reasonable, then I'm just going to go. Then fine, I'm going to take my argument elsewhere and let someone else hear me. And to say that to Canute, who's the king, to say, okay, then fine, I don't want to talk to you anymore, bye, and excuse yourself from the tea party. Like, Canute's never had anybody do that to him before, right? And I love that. I want to go through this episode and talk about kind of Canute's, like, just bafflement that Thorfinn has the balls to tell the king of Denmark, fine, you're wasting my time, I'm going to go talk to somebody who cares. And it has the biggest influence on him, but I do enter all of this with some trepidation, because the midway point of the episode, when Canute withdraws his forces from the farm and doesn't take over any other farms, and then withdraws his forces from England, that all sounds great, and we're going to talk about that. That sounds like what Askeladd wanted him to do all along. It just took Thorfinn of all people to get him there. It all sounds great. Everything sounds peachy keen, sunshine and rainbows. But like we know from this series, just the one good deed and one action is not going to mean that everything's just crystal clear, rose-colored glasses from here on in. No. Am I excited that Thorfinn wants to start Vinland with Einar, his best bro forever, and create a world without slavery and war and violence? Yes. Do I think that's going to be an easy peasy goal to accomplish? Hell to the no, because there's going to be 8,000 conflicts that are going to arise from that. And I guess that's the point of the series is, okay, well, Thorfinn has made a claim. He's done this thing. He's taking a stand. He's taking his first steps towards creating Vinland. It's not going to be easy. And I'm sure with this series, if they keep the anime going, it's going to tackle, okay, well, what conflicts are you going to arise from this, right? And we talk about that in this episode, but everything coming full circle, the carved speech. And I know Ruby wants me to pet her, and that's what I'm doing. My dogs are like, play with me and pet me. Human. But yeah, the whole carved speech. The carved speech. From season 2's opening to now. I love the idea that we talked about from flesh to flora and fauna. It goes from humanity to nature itself. I love that. I was like, it's one of those moments where you know the mangaka, they've been planning that all along, and they've been building it up to come full circle, and you're just like, oh, you did it. You planned this from the start. I love it. It's such a great mangaka moment. It's like that. We'll talk about Attack on Titan a little bit with this entire episode. Aaron, take notes. But yeah, I feel like just like where Isayama makes things come full circle in a series, as I'm reading the manga for Attack on Titan, I feel like this series as well makes things come full circle. And that carved speech at the end, in the beginning of season 1, it was all about blades and weaponry and carving into the flesh and war and destruction and blood and guts and violence. And here it transforms that. And it's like, no, it's carving yourself into the land, carving into ideals, carving into mindsets, carving into the way people think about other things and treat each other. It's a whole different context and a whole different meaning. And the impressive thing is, it's that it's the same language. It's just viewed through a different perspective. And that is like, I'm sure the mangaka is like, that's the point. That's where Thorfinn has come. The moment where he tells Omar, he was like, you got there. It just took you this like 6 month span. It took me 15 years. I was like, oh my God. So Thorfinn's 21. The most wisdom a 21-year-old has ever had. Like, Nostra frickin' Damus right here, right? I was like, how, Thorfinn? How can you be this smart at 21? I was not making the philosophical decisions you were making at 21. Absolutely not. Oh my God. Two paths. So the two paths are clearly Canute's path and Thorfinn's path. Those are the two paths we're talking about, right? Because Einar's on the same path as the Congregation of the True Warriors. Is it just me, or did they just make Canute look... Mappa decided today's the day. We're gonna make Canute look the best he's ever looked. Like last episode, he looked glorious. This episode, I'm like, I need to see Canute laughing for the rest of my Vinland Saga experience. Please and thank you. Because he looked so good there. Like, it made him look instantly younger. Like, so much younger. Like, not like a diva, you know? Like, in season 1, Canute had, like, this, like... Canute looked very youthful because of the long hair and the fresh face. But he kind of had this, like, posh diva look to him. And here, Canute looks so youthful and vibrant, which they're both in the 21-year-olds. It's so sad. Thorfinn looks like he's in his mid-30s because of all the hardship he's gone through by the time he's 21. It's like, dude, what the hell? But yeah, I feel for him. I do. And so I love that the guard comes up to Thorfinn right off the bat and he's like, you're a strange man, but it'd be a shame to kill you, you weird one. I love they're like, you're a sad, strange little man and you have my pity. Yeah, and Thorfinn's just like, And then that's when Einar says, they're not going to listen to us. This is how the world works. In the end, might makes right. And at the time, I was like, well, Einar, that you being melodramatic, damn Vikings. So, Canute has established himself as chief of the Viking chiefs. And Canute is basically establishing, in Canute's mindset, the Viking way is this idea of might makes right. And that there's no escaping it. It's going to happen. And Canute's kind of in a bad position, right? Canute's kind of in a precarious position because as much as we'd like for Canute to just, lay down arms, I think if Canute had the choice, I think if Canute did not feel like he had to keep up with this whole chief among chief Vikings, I think if Canute thought he could get away with it, he would have gone off with Thorfinn. I think he would have let everything go and been like, all right, Thorfinn, let's go jump this Einar guy off. He doesn't have to come with us. I think Canute would have totally been on board with going along with what Thorfinn said, if not for anything than the fact that he's curious. I think Canute is so curious by how Thorfinn has changed and how he is now that he's like, wait, why are you like this? Where have you been all these years? Who are you taking after? What's going on? I think if Canute had the option, he would have dropped everything and been like, let's go. I want to see more of what you got to show me, Thorfinn. But he has this obligation and also a disembodied head following him around. So we'll talk about Swin. We're going to put Swin right here and talk about his influence here because it's very curious how it's positioned. It's very curious how it's worded in this episode. But Einar is convinced that the Vikings are not going to change their mind. And Thorfinn's just like... Thorfinn is kind of coming under the understanding that he knows the history of the Vikings, but he knows that it's not set in stone. Right? He knows it's not set in stone. He's like, my dad wasn't like this. He was a warrior and became like this. I was a warrior. I became like this. He's like, Thorfinn is from experience seen that just because the Vikings have a culture like this doesn't mean you can't change within that culture. Thorfinn's a prime example of it. And Canute seems convinced that the Vikings are just going to be Vikings and that's all we can do. We can't change mindsets, much less change whatever's happening with them. But Thorfinn doesn't seem so sure if that's the case. And meanwhile, we have the head of Swin saying, my foolish son. So this is the curious part about the whole monologue of Swin, right? This is the curious part of that monologue because for the most part throughout this season, anytime Canute has talked to Swin, it has been under the guise that we, the audience, are to assume that the head of Swin is actually Canute's inner monologue. It's just him talking to himself. Anytime he's thinking about things, mulling things over, he's like thinking about himself as his father. And his father's advice is just him mulling over what his father would probably think. And even in the part where they're like up on top of the barricades, looking down, getting ready to leave to go to Kettle's farm, the way that Canute talks to his dad is phrased in a way that it just seems like Canute talking to himself. And he views a lot of his own ideals and his own rationale and thinking patterns as that of his father. Here, it's a little weird because here it's almost as if Canute is separating himself and what he really thinks from his dad's thoughts and what he thinks his father would think. Because he says the whole thing, my foolish son, is very much making Canute seem like separated from the dad's head, even though we as the audience know by now that they're the same person, right? So that's so fascinating. He says, my foolish son. And he tells Canute, you're still not yet a king. Meaning, he says, you are not in full control yet. You have a crown, but you're not fully recognized by everyone as the king as of yet. Why did you reveal your true feelings to such a lowly man? I love that Thorfinn is like, has this like radiating warm glow around him. It's like a fire, right? Thorfinn is represented by this fire, which is so good. But he's wondering, he's like, why did you, Canute, reveal yourself to Thorfinn? And I mean, Thorfinn has a warm and inviting presence to him now, right? Which is kind of crazy. But I like, again, Thorfinn, I'm going to put Thorfinn, and he's represented by this flame or this warmth, which is so fun because you think about him coming from Iceland in the cold. All in season 1, it was this big contrast where you had Thorfinn's personality was so cold, but at the same time, it was so fiery and ferocious. And here, it's kind of the opposite. There's this like cool, calm surface, but this fire underneath. It's the polar opposite of how it was in season 1, and I love it. But yeah, Canute's just like, why did I reveal myself? And honestly, to me, I think back of, well, you've known Thorfinn for a long time, and you kind of did reveal stuff about yourself around him when you guys had that dinner together with Ragnar back in season 1. You revealed stuff about your past to Thorfinn then. Like, there's always been some part of Canute. And if you're a Thorfinn and Canute shipper, then was this the episode for you? Because it always seems like there's been a part of Canute that's kind of bared itself to Thorfinn, even when Thorfinn's unaware that it was bearing itself. So very much the case in this season. Yeah, very much the case. Why did you just to such lowly men? Meaning Einar and Thorfinn. And I'm sorry, but the animation of Swin's head like slowly floating up to Canute's shoulder, did anybody else think it was kind of like Aqua Teen Hunger Force? It was just like the Moonanites coming up. The animation was so smooth, it almost felt unnatural. It just felt like Carl's head floating on Canute's shoulder, maybe. But yeah. And him saying, I love the shot. Again, it's from the OP where you have the two stags meeting, right? The two wildebeests meeting. But the idea of Thorfinn having this like red little glow, he's like holding Calcifer in his hand, this glow around him. And Canute is in the darkness, right? Surely you don't expect that you will understand each other. Again, there's all the doubts that Canute has. He says, can we understand each other? Can we understand each other? Is that possible? Can these two men from two walks of life that have very different ideologies, seemingly, they're very similar in lots of ways, but can they understand one another? Yes, I think so. I think that they both want kind of the same thing. They're just going about it in different ways. But I think if they talk to one another, they would understand, right? And Swin's head, oh my God, the little king's head, they're a poor flock of sheep. And then he says here, you are an aloof shepherd, which is such a curious thing. So the whole thing about the flock, we have the flock of sheep, right? We're going to use that metaphor. The flock of sheep. And the king describes Canute as an aloof shepherd, which is kind of meaning unseeming or unpresuming. I'm like, I would describe Canute as many things. Aloof is not one of them, right? He says, you're just a mere shepherd. What could you do? He says, you raise them, cull them, and skin them. I'm like, sir, have you ever raised a sheep before? Because he says, raise, cull, and skin. I had a couple sheep when I was a kid. We usually had goats. We had goats more than sheep, but I did raise a few sheep. You shear them. You shear the wool off of them, but that's just the outer layer. It's like cutting your hair. It grows back. You're not scalping them. You're just literally chopping the hair off. It will grow back. If you raise them, cull them, and skin them, that's the job of a butcher. That's not the job of a shepherd. And that's kind of the thing, right? The way that Canute is going about it in warmongering is that it's kind of that of a butcher more than a shepherd, right? A shepherd, if you're going to talk terminology here, a shepherd is in charge of organizing, guarding, and leading / protecting the flock from going astray, right? Their job is to watch over the flock, to guide them, to keep them organized, keep them herded together, but to make sure none of them go astray. Their job is not to skin or cull. No, maybe as a farmer you would raise the sheep, you would cull them. Culling means, if you don't know what cull means, it means there's something wrong with them, and that's why you get rid of them. So in this case, he's likening it to you raise your armies, you raise your peoples, you cull out the communities and the cities that you don't like, the countries that you fought against, and then you skin them alive, take the trophies, and in Swin's mind, you skin them alive, and the skin is your bounty. The reality is, you just cut their hair and it grows back. And that's how you make money. You keep doing it over and over again, right? But the way he describes it is kind of like just this violent cycle, right? But that's not really what a shepherd is. But that's what Canute thinks that it is. And it's what his father has conditioned him to think that it is. And so he says, how could the sheep understand the work of a shepherd? Saying like the sheep don't understand the work that the shepherd does, which is true. Yeah, if they're the sheep, it's like they don't understand what goes into it. There is only control. That's the idea. To the butcher, it's all about control and the power, right? But here, it's about the relationship. And that's really the difference between what Thorfinn gets at with Canute, is that for Canute, up until the moment where Thorfinn's like, bye, he's just like, I have to control this situation. I have to control Kettle's farm. It's about power. It's about authority. It's about control. I can't be a king without these things. And for Thorfinn, he's like, fine. You want to do that? I don't agree with it. I don't like it. Fine. But for Thorfinn, he's like, it will do me no good to attack you. It does not help the flock of sheep if I attack you. So I'm going to maintain our relationship and say, look, if we agree to disagree, I'm going to back out and say, okay, bye. I have nothing else to say to you. But I'm not going to ruin our relationship and destroy that just to try and prove my point when I know it's not going to work. And that's something that Canute just seems to be like, wait, what are you talking about? Why would you say such a thing? What are you talking about? It's what's best for the sheep. Yeah, he's like, control is what's best for the sheep, which is honestly, if we're going to go back to the whole slavery argument, that's a lot of people's argument throughout history of being pro-slavery, is they're like, oh, it's for their best interests. And it's like, well, no. It's like, how would you know? Right? That goes back to Einar's conversation. He's like, you have no clue what it feels like to be on this side of things. And we've seen by what's happened to Gardar, what's happened to Arnheid, what that control does to people and how it puts them into a corner and how people react to it, right? It may seem like you may have their best interests in mind, but it is not in their best interest to control someone. Like, nobody wants that, right? And that's what I love, that the moment he's like, oh, it's like the head keeps trying to poison Canute, and keep him in the darkness. But then Thorfinn, like a beacon, like a torch, like a light, like a lantern, if we're doing Attack on Titan references, like shines through with the true knowledge. And I love that the head of Sven is like, that's what's so crazy about this episode. The head of Sven like almost reacts to Thorfinn like how dare you invade our thoughts? And Thorfinn like cuts through everything to say, Canute, if you intend to use your authority to force your way. And he's like, kill him. That's the thing. So Thorfinn's like, if you're going to keep using your authority, if Canute uses his authority, then I'm just going to run. If that's where we're going to go. But Sven, the talking head, tells him to kill Thorfinn. That he's dangerous. I love that moment. He's like, I am not approving of this relationship. Not one bit. Saying he's dangerous. A single sheep can lead the entire flock astray towards a cliff. And that's such a curious thing, because what that's suggesting is that Canute believes that Thorfinn's ideology of pacifism is going to cause people destruction. He believes from that, or the head of Sven, however you prefer it, believes that Thorfinn's pacifism is going to cause people a lot of grief, because they're going to they're basically committing suicide by not being part of the Viking way, by trying to circumvent it, by trying to change it. It's basically suicide. He's like, so it's no different than someone leaving. It's no different than a single sheep leading the entire flock off a cliff. So at this point, Sven is not recognizing Thorfinn as a shepherd, but as a sheep himself. When we, the audience, know it's kind of no, they're both shepherds. At least they both should be shepherds, right? And I love that. And Thorfinn's like, I will. And he says, kill him. I love that there's that doubt. See, there's that doubt. That doubt, because Canute thinks there's no way that Thorfinn would do anything but try to provoke him or attack him. He thinks that there'd be no other way it would go any other direction. And then Thorfinn says, I'm going to run. And it just like, he's like, do your job as king. All you can do is cut through your enemies, right? But Thorfinn has no enemies. I'm going to run. I love that shot where he's like, fine, I'm going to leave. And like the light shining through his hair, like everything, and the sparkles. And that transition to Canute, like I love the transition of the light shining one way into Canute, the light shining the other way. It's such a beautiful transition. And he's just like, what? Excuse me? And everybody's just kind of looking at each other like, what? And even Einar's like, what are we doing? We came all this way for what? And that's when Canute says, you'll simply run? That's it? And Thorfinn says it best. He just looks at Canute and is like, well, you're not going to change your ways. What else can I do? Yeah, what else can I do? He's like, do you want us to just stand here and kill each other? What good's that going to do? I love it! He's like, there's no way out of this. You're not going to concede. I'm not conceding, but I don't want to fight you. That's dumb. He's like, what good does that do? And I love that he looks over and says, the paradise you describe helps many people while oppressing few. So he says that the paradise that you want is a paradise for the many over the few. And for Thorfinn's like, well, that may be well and good. I'm glad you're thinking about the majority. But he's like, what about the few? He's like, what happens to the people who are trampled to give you what you want? Where do they go? Do they just die? Are they just doomed? He's like, I don't think that's fair. It's like, I don't think they should have to suffer that. That doesn't make sense to me. And so, yeah, he says that's how it works, right? And he says, I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing. I like that Thorfinn's like, I don't really know how to counter this. I like that Thorfinn's like, you know, last episode, as my dogs are going crazy, last episode, it was very easy. I realized, you know, when Blue made that comment about, well, what about Canute ruling a kingdom and stuff? It became very obvious that it's hard. And you'll have to excuse my dog's barking, so I apologize. But it became very easy to realize that, yeah, it's easy for us to like instantly pick a side and argue against Canute. But Thorfinn kind of brings up a good point. He's like, I don't really know if it's good or bad. He's like, is it good that you're trying to save the majority? Is it bad that you're squashing people regardless? He's like, I don't know. He's like, I'm just a 21-year-old kid who spent most of his life as a slave or completely in the dark about everything. So he's like, I'm just a simple guy. I don't know if it's right. He's like, I don't have any right to criticize your crazy ideas. I love he says your crazy ideas. He's like, I mean, you sound kind of bonkers, but who am I to judge? So the only option left is to run. I don't have any other way to go. And he's like, let's go, Einar. He says, you're an exceptional warrior. There are other ways. I love it. And then Canute's like, did you, I love that Canute's like, did you just, let yourself get punched 100 times just so you could come in here and diss me and walk away from me without anything happening? And Thorfinn's response, he's like, I wasted my time. I was like, oh my God, that's the best diss you could have gave. He was like, I don't know what I thought coming here would do. I thought you'd understand. People told me you'd understand that you were this kind of king, but I guess you're not. So yeah, no, I'm not gonna stay here any longer. And Canute's laugh. I thought it was either gonna be one way or the other. He was either gonna laugh out loud or he was gonna explode and be mad. And I was like, I hope it's laughter. And it is. And his face, he instantly looks 12 years younger. He looks like a kid again. In that moment where he just like laughs at Thorfinn is like, are you freaking kidding me? Like just genuinely laugh. He's like, I've been stuck with these uptight Vikings for 15 years, Thorfinn. These people don't know how to tell a joke. They're not fun. He's like, these Vikings suck. You're the first humorous person I've seen in a decade, and you're gonna leave me, huh? I went into this episode thinking that maybe Canute would try to take him with him, but he didn't. No, I thought he'd try to enlist maybe Thorgil or Snake, but he didn't. I was like, I was so surprised. But yeah, I'm just laughing. I like that Thorfinn and Einar are kind of like, what's so funny? Like, why are you laughing? And he just, I just felt like Iago, like looking at Jafar from Aladdin, like, oh God, he snapped. like Canute is Jafar, like, oh God, he's cracked. But no, he's just, and even Wolf is like, what the fudge? I've never seen this kid laugh before. But he's like, there are many who wish to bargain with me. Some try to ensnare me too. But, and he's like, you're unbelievable. I love his face. He's just like incredulously looking at Thorfinn, like, look at you. Like, who knew you'd grow up this way? But I love the idea that he says that, people have tried to bargain and fight, but they always wanted something from me. They always wanted something from me because I was the king. And you're like the first person who's been like, just whatever, don't care that I'm the king. And Canute's like, it's one of those things that you want what you can't have. And Thor's like, you absolute fool. And I just love that. It's almost like it's endearing, him calling Thorfinn a fool. And Thorfinn's like, yeah, what of it? You don't have anything up your sleeve. You're completely unarmed and thoroughly beaten. And you simply came to tell me not to take the farm. And that's it. And I love the camera angle of him just laughing. And Thorfinn's like, is it really that funny? And Canute's like, dude, I've been talking to a discombobulated head the last 10 years. Let me be. Or 4 years or whatever. Let me be. I've never participated in such ridiculous peace talks before. But yeah. It's just like the idea that Thorfinn didn't want anything. He just came there with a simple mission. He didn't expect Canute to give him something. He just came to state his case and make a claim for it. And it's like, fine, if you're not going to give me what I want, then I'm going to leave. Okay. Right? Because that seems like such against human nature. Because, we expect humanity to have a response like Kettle. Where when you're threatened, you defend yourself. When you're threatened, you argue against it, or you try to negotiate, or you try to do something. You don't just, it would be like if Kettle and his family was like, okay, well, Canute says if we don't surrender, we're just gonna have to leave. So I guess we're just gonna have to leave, and that was it. We didn't have any conflict. So to Canute, it's hard to imagine. He realizes that there can be people like Thorfinn come from the Vikings. that again, he kind of realizes the same thing that Thorfinn's realized, that people can change and they can exist like this. I love it. And I love that he takes a breath and he's like, okay, let me catch myself. He's like, you'll run, huh? He's like, I really don't want you to leave now. And Thorfinn's like, yes, I'm going to go. He's like, yeah, I'm leaving. And then, and just the smoldering look on Canute's face. I'm sorry. I know 1,000 of you are going to be like, oh, Romania, why must you ship them? Why must you? It's because of shit like this. It's because of shots like that with Canute looking softly as all get out at Thorfinn like he's a damn piece of cheesecake. Yes. And then he sees the light shining. He's like, so the Vikings are capable of producing someone like you. Eloquently worded, my dear man. He says, you're a beautiful man. Which, yes, I fully realize okay, you all have to understand. From here on in, there are several moments where I'm like, the translation, you all chose those translations. Those are the words you picked to translate. Okay. All right. I mean, the beautiful man is true. There's nothing sexual or romantic about it. Thorfinn is a beautiful man. He has this light around him, this ideology. He has a beautiful soul. There is nothing romantic or sexual about it. I will believe it 100%. I'm like, yes, absolutely. Am I going to ship the hell out of it anyway? Of course. But I respect, right? I respect. He says, where will you go to escape war? And at this point, he's like, somewhere other than here. Calling back to season 1, where the episode was called Anywhere But Here, or somewhere that's not here. I was like, oh, just calling back from the first season. I love it. But here's the thing. I honestly, Thorfinn's plan, if Canute went down the same path that he was planning, Thorfinn's like, we're just going to run where you aren't. And I love this that Canute was like, where will you go? And Thorfinn's like, why would I tell you? I felt like Wedding Crashers where Isla Fisher's character's like, I'll find you. I feel like Canute is like in his little boat thinking of Thorfinn being like, I'll find you. Like a damn stage 5 clinger. Yeah, that's what I figure. But yeah, I thought that maybe also what Thorfinn was getting at is that, if you don't change your ways and you keep thinking that control is the only thing you can manage, then what's going to happen eventually down the line is that, eventually, there's going to be someone in the conflict eventually best you. I mean, that Einar kind of talked about it in the last episode where, one king came to take his land, another king came to kill his family, you're the third king. Do you sense a pattern? They're not all the same men. It's different men each time, meaning someone's going to overthrow you. So I feel like even though Canute changes a lot of his ways rather quickly in this episode, I don't feel like Canute's troubles are over at all because he's still the king. And now I'm like, here's the problem. The problem is Canute. Canute has been wooed by Thorfinn. Oh, Canute, he has been thoroughly wooed by Thorfinn. And I feel like part of me is he's gonna try to conquer all these lands to find Thorfinn and get back to him. But the problem is, Canute finds a kindred spirit in Thorfinn, which is great. But he's pissed off probably a lot of people along the way to get here. And so Thorgal being one of them. So my theory is, Thorgal's gone off on his own way with his spear in hand. My theory is, and I could be totally off base, I don't want to be told I'm wrong or right, but I feel like Thorgal is going to go and kind of like, we've got 3 different paths. We say we have 2 paths. I think we really have 3. I think we really have Thorgal, we have Thorfinn, and we have Canute. I think Canute and Thorfinn are going to go their separate ways and do their own thing, but they're kind of related. We're going to touch base on that. But I think Thorgal's going to find the enemies of Canute, the people Canute has pissed off, even if he's not conquered them, the people that Canute has made mad. And Thorgal, I think, is going to try to stage like a revolt against Canute. And here's the thing. We've seen that revolts can work if you plan it right. And Thorgal, despite being kind of crazy, is a pretty decent planner. So I get a little bit worried for Canute that Thorgal is going to try to take matters into his own hands and try to gather up resources. And Thorgal plays off the hate. He plays off the cycle. And he, him and Kettle kind of spurned everybody on. So I'm afraid that Thorgal's going to try to do that and cause this ruckus. And Canute may be wooed by Thorfinn, but, he's not exactly going to change all the Vikings' mindset in a day like Thorfinn's changed his. So we'll talk about that in a minute. We'll talk about that in a minute with the English, because I wanted to touch base on that. And yeah, Thorfinn's like, I ain't telling you where I'm going. I don't want you to follow me, you clinger. And he's like, my territory will continue to grow. My power may eventually reach that place. And Thorfinn's like, yeah, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. I'll just run as far as I can. Yeah, as long as I've got someplace to run to, I'm not going to fight you. Nope. Not going to attack you. I'll create a peaceful place beyond the king's reach using methods that are different than yours. He's like, we're going to try this out. Who's going to have the better idea, me or you? For the people who can't live in the world you create. Yeah, he's like, you're going to trample on some of these. You're going to do the power of the many or the power of the few. I'm going to take the power of the few, and we're going to kind of go over here and do our own thing and run away from you, right? And we're just going to do that, okay? And just keep going where you can't reach us. I'm going to get an Attack on Titan spoilers here for just a moment. So if you're an Attack on Titan fan, I'm going to put something up here that's like Attack on Titan spoilers. Now, granted, I have not seen part 3 of season 4, so please no spoilers on that. I've just seen up to part 2 of season 4, The Dawn of Humanity. That's where I'm at right now. But it's been funny because I've been comparing Canute to Eren Yeager for a while, and I think that there's parts of Canute that are similar to Eren. However, the whole thing about his paradise being for the many over the few is exactly the opposite of Eren. Eren wanted to protect the few people that didn't fit in the rest of the world from the world, which is kind of what Thorfinn wants to do, right? The only difference that's so shocking in this is that rather than Thorfinn being like, I'm going to gather all these people up and use this crazy supernatural power to destroy the world and save the few, instead Thorfinn's like, no, I'm going to run away. Bye. I'm going to leave you and go. And then just stay away from you. It's almost to the point where I wonder, what if Eren had been like, hey, I'm going to take the people of Parody, and if you're going to attack Marley for its resources that are underground, then we're just going to go somewhere else. And we're just going to run away from you until you're ready to talk. And we're going to take the Titans with us. The warriors are all going to go. You're not going to be able, develop your technologies to fight us, whatever. But we have this supernatural ability. We're just going to go and do our thing. And if you don't want to negotiate with us, then fine. But we're going to run away and go. Bye. And then eventually, maybe down the line, if they kept trying to negotiate and create a talk, maybe something would have happened. Who knows? Who knows? But Thorfinn's experience and Eren Yeager's experiences are quite different. And they're quite different characters. So it's hard to make those claims, right? There's not an easy comparison there, but it was just making me think. I was like, the idea of Thorfinn saying that I'm going to leave the majority and the few of us are going to go and create our own paradise. Y'all just leave us alone. We don't want anything to do with you. It made me just think like, man, if they just gathered up all the people from Parody and been like, hey, we know that planes exist now. might as well join the 21st century, right? Or whatever century it is in Attack on Titan world. And just go into the situation and do our best. It made me think about that. I was like, that could have been handled so interestingly if it had gone that route, but it didn't. So, end of Attack on Titan spoilers. I just thought that was interesting that Thorfinn's like, yeah, for you and for me. I love the idea of it getting dark and the stars coming out. It looks so beautiful. Like, Mappa does a really good job of slowly easing that sunset so naturally. And so, yeah, okay, I'm sorry. Again, y'all hate me, but the transcription here, the translation says, so you'll fill the hole that my work cannot. I was like, you could have worded that a little differently, especially when the next line, he says, are you capable of that? Canute's like, can you do that? And Thorfinn's saying, my power is so much smaller than yours, which is true. He has a lot less power than Canute. I can't fill a very large hole. My mind's in the gutter. I took Thorfinn for being a top. Clearly that was my mistake. Nope. Forget it. Nope, forget it. But yeah, I like the idea that Thorfinn is, forgive me. I like the idea that Thorfinn is like, no. He's like, I don't have as much power and reach that you do. He's like, he's like, you've created such a massive hole with this plan of yours. He's like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to patch it up. Don't know if I'm going to be able to put the Band-Aid that it's needed on there. However, despite that, I'm still going to try. He's like, if you keep oppressing people, eventually no one will be able to save you. That line, that was the line I wanted to go back to. I love that. He's like, if you oppress people, if you oppress and push people away, then there'll be no one to save you. And that's, again, Attack on Titan. Again, the idea that if you keep fighting people and if you keep pushing them away, no one's going to be there when you need help. You need to create these relationships. That's what Thorfinn's all about, is relationships. He's like, you need to create those so that people will be there for you. If you keep fighting, if you keep trying to conquer people, you are going to make people mad. You may be appeasing your people, but you're going to drive others against you. That kind of goes back to Askeladd. He's like, look at Askeladd. He's like, Askeladd hated the Danes for what they did to his mother, for what they did to his people. He hated them. And so he was fueled by revenge. He's like, Thorfinn's like, I know what that's like. I've been doing it the last 15 years. He's like, if you just keep oppressing people, eventually they're going to bite back. And the thing is, what I thought Thorfinn was going to get at, and he doesn't really say it, is that eventually Canute is going to challenge someone who's going to be stronger than him. He's going to challenge, he's going to try to stop the wave, and the wave's going to crash down on him anyway. He's not going to be able to stop the wave. And we've seen that happen with Swin. We've seen that happen with other kings. Like, Thorfinn's like, the writing's on the wall. You got to change your ways or it's only going to get worse. You can't control everything. And I love that he gets this pose. Like, he's like schooling him. Like, Thorfinn of all people is giving Canute advice. It is just beyond me. You need to try harder. Don't make more work for me. He's like, quit making your hole so big. Quit it. Tighten that shit up. Do it. He's like, quit making things harder for me. I'm only one guy and I'm 5 foot nothing. And I like the Canute's like, okay, you've become rather eloquent. Has he now? Has he? And then he says, who did you take after? I wanted him to say Thor's, but Thorfinn's even like, I think Thorfinn knows that it's both Thor's and Askeladd, because Askeladd was rather eloquent himself. And that pose with his arms is something that Askeladd would do. Honestly, the thing with his arms, Thor's wouldn't do that, but Askeladd would do that. And so it's kind of like Canute's saying, like, we both have kind of taken after Askeladd, whether we like it or not. We've both been influenced by him for better or for worse. And then, yeah. And I just love that face. Why does he have to smolder? Show. Why do you have to make Canute look so damn good? Why? And he's scratching his chin. He's like, I've never participated in such challenging peace talks before. Because that's the thing. When people argue and you get mad and flustered about something, it's easy to argue against somebody that's mad, right? It's easy to do that because when you argue against somebody that's mad, they usually make a mistake. Or they overstep their boundaries, or they say something they don't mean. It's easy to talk against somebody that's mad. But people that keep their cool, it's hard to argue against somebody that keeps their cool. Because they're able to think things through and rationalize and talk it out. And it's hard to keep your cool when you're mad and when you're arguing. But that's what makes it the more challenging. And they get to make Canute look so damn good. Why? And then Thorgal shows up and they're all gone. They all left. The ship's left. He's like, our battle hasn't been settled. And yep, they left. He's like, and of course Floki's pissed off. Screw Floki. He can be pissed off. Let him be. Screw him. Who cares about Floki? Yeah, he doesn't understand why we're withdrawing. And Canute's like, Wolf, are you dissatisfied? Because you probably know why I've left. And Wolf's like, I love that Wolf looks so peaceful. Wolf and Pater look like the same. Like somebody was saying if Wolf and Pater were related. I'm like, I would not be surprised. Because they both look kind of the same. I love, he's like, no, I'm not dissatisfied. He's like, I'm very proud of you, sir. Right? He says, I'm canceling our plans to seize the other farms as well. I wouldn't want to create more work for Thorfinn. I'm like, shut up! Just get out of here, you crush. So yeah, so he's decided, so here's the thing. Canute decides to withdraw. He decides to withdraw from the farms, right? Now, the whole point of going to the farms in the first place was because he needed the money to support the troops that were in England. That was the whole point of doing the requisition on the farms. So, because they're not going to attack the farms, because he doesn't want to cause more work for Thorfinn, and because he probably doesn't want to create more people like Thorfinn, you know? One person like Thorfinn is easy for Canute to deal with. A lot of people with Thorfinn's mindset might be a little tricky. So we don't want too much work for Thorfinn to do. So no. We're gonna withdraw from the farms. Which, in hindsight, you know how much that sucks? That we went through all of this battle. We lost Arnheid. We went through all of this just so you could turn around and leave. I mean, I'm glad. I'm not gonna complain. It's just kind of like a, man, we really dodged the bullet, except we didn't dodge the bullet. But because he has to withdraw from the farms, he's not gonna get that money. So then Canute is faced with the decision. What do we do? So he decides, since we can't get the money, then we're going to withdraw the forces from England because we can't pay for it. And honestly, I don't think the Danish troops would probably be that upset about it because they're probably like, we've been just sitting here doing nothing this whole time. And because Canute doesn't want us to do anything, so why are we still here? Let's go home. And I love that he looks up at the stars and like, why do they just make it look so damn good? Every shot of Canute looks good in this episode. I just want to frame it. He's like, I thought you were the only one fighting with me. That line too. Damn it, that line too. Because yeah, Canute's saying, Wolf, I thought you were the only one who thought the same way I did and realized that this whole Viking logic and everything is a bunch of hokum and bullshit. I thought you were the only one that thought that this was all stupid. But you're not. Thorfinn also thinks it's stupid. I have an ally, which is the craziest thing, that they're allies in this, right? Today I gained new allies. And then the face he makes, where he just kind of has like, he does like the little cat thing where he goes, he does a little cat grin. What the fudge, show? He just looks like he's like preening. He's so happy he made a friend. I'm like, damn it, Canute. Damn it, you diva. It's so cute. How dare they? So yeah, and it shows him like withdrawing the troops and everything. And so here's the deal. So they lead the troops out. He says, later Canute ordered the disbandment of the Danish army stationed in England. Like, let's get the hell out of here. That had been pressuring the English finances for money. And so then, in the end, Canute's Danish forces dwindled to a mere 16 ships. So, he cut their forces to 16 ships. Still enough, but much less than it had been, right? Much less than it had been. So it's going to be curious. I mean, I'm all for this. Don't get me wrong. I'm all for Canute withdrawing the army, getting, like, some of the things he does here are a little bit more Ascaladian, which we'll talk about. So cutting the ship's forces, doing all that, making it more concise and smaller. All for that. Good. Great. My only concern is what Canute's been fearing this whole time is the Danish armies having some hesitations and not liking where things are headed. Because we saw with Swin, we saw that the Danish forces were getting a little bit like kind of uppity and kind of riled up about the fact of battle and worrying about, well, if we aren't fighting anybody and we're not taking over any countries, what are we going to do? And it seems like Canute is maybe getting to that point. So that's going to become the question, what do they do now? Especially if we're limiting it to only 16 ships and forces. What do we do? How does he expand his forces otherwise? But I think he gives an example of that in that he didn't need the forces in England. Whereas we see the ships heading out, right? We see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. The 3 big ships and then the 13 smaller ships. The English uprising the people had feared would occur never happened. because he withdrew the troops. And then he has the crown. The English nobility realized the trust Canute had placed in them, that they weren't, and when he relinquished his military forces. So yeah, so the idea of him like turning and taking them away, the relationship between the conqueror and the conquered began to change. That's what Askeladd wanted the entire time. Askeladd was trying to tell him that. He's like, hey, you know, or that's what he told Thorfinn. He was like, the Romans built this relationship with the people that they encountered and conquered, and it wasn't so much a like master-slave relationship. Instead, it was more like two people working together, and there were negotiations, etc., and they shared cultures, etc., and whatever. And I feel like that's what Thorfinn, and that's where Canute is getting at, and it's because of Thorfinn's influence, which is the craziest thing. The craziest thing. And then it shows him with the crown. The relationship between conqueror and conquered began to change. So Canute has the crown, right? And I love that, like, you see the scar embedded in his skin, and he's just staring forward into the night sky. And where is he going to from here? So that's curious, right? And he says, I feel good. Good for Canute. So I don't know. The fact that Canute says he told Thorfinn that he was still going to spread his reign, but I don't know if he is or not anymore. I don't know if he's going to try to rule Denmark and lead by Thorfinn's example. Thorfinn, like, his Nakama beam pierced Canute's heart, and he's going to try to lead by example. My fear is that Thorgal or some uprising because of all this is going to attack Canute. That's my fear. But I don't know. And the crazy thing may be, we may never see Canute for like another, 3 or 4 seasons after this. They may be like, here was Canute's story. Now it's over. Now we're going to focus on Thorfinn and who he's going to encounter next. And I'm like, wait a minute, what's happening? So I don't know if we'll see Canute after this for a while. I mean, I assume we're going to keep seeing him, but I don't know in the next episode if we're going to get like political intrigue, like we see the aftermath of Canute's actions, and if how the people of Denmark feel about all of this versus the people of England. Like, what does Thorkel think about all this? Thorkel was in England, right? Or was he in Denmark, like sharpening his blades with his bosom buddy? Like, what do they think about all of this? Does Thorkel know that Thorfinn's alive? Is Canute gonna tell him about it? What's Floki think about Thorfinn and all of this? Like what? We don't know. So I don't know if the next episode is going to focus on the aftermath with Canute, or if they're just going to leave him here for now, and this is the last we see of him. In the reaction, it felt like such an immediate 180, like we skipped over a lot of things and Canute just suddenly changed his ways because of Thorfinn's influence, but I guess that's all it took. It did feel a little bit rushed, but I'm glad it happened. I'm glad it emphasizes the effect that Thorfinn had on a king. Thorfinn's a king himself, having an effect on Canute the king. But I just feel like there should be more with Canute. So I don't know if we're going to get that next episode or not. We may not. We may just leave Canute off for now, and that's it. But I don't know. And so then we have Thorfinn going up and seeing Einar. And I'm sure, I can already see the comments now. I'm sure a lot of people are going to complain and be like, they wasted 3 minutes having Thorfinn like walk up the path in silence and having him stand next to Einar in silence. That was so boring. I can see the comments now, but I honestly love that moment. I love it, one, because it's showing that Thorfinn got the shit beat out of him. And it's one of those things where it doesn't hit you till like a day or two later, and then you're like, oh God, I really feel bad. So he's like still like recovering, but also that silence, that reverence towards Arnheid, but it's also Einar's conflict is not over, because he still feels like he was inadequate in protecting Arnheid. He was inadequate in protecting his mom and his sister. So Einar still has a chip on his shoulder that's not going anywhere anytime soon. But luckily, while that chip's on his shoulder, he's got brother Thorfinn to come through and be with him, right? I love it. And I love the way that they draw Thorfinn. He looks like the most 30-year-old, 21-year-old ever, but I love it. And you just see the sadness etched on his face. He's like, when Arnheid drew her last breath, I couldn't tell her why she had to live. What do you say to someone who yearns for the peace of death? But I love that he just makes that fist. And the show almost got me here. He's like, I want a world where I can tell people to live. One I can proudly describe to people whose only salvation is death. And the birds flying over a place more appealing than death. And I was like, show, are you about to get me, you're about to get me sad, aren't you? In that moment where, like, his face is still all, like discombobulated from getting pounded, and just, like, he just looks so sad, but then being like, that's all we ever wanted in this world we live in. A place that we can go to we'd rather be than death. I was like, show, are you gonna make me cry again? It almost did. It almost did. I was feeling the emotion well up, and I was like, don't you cry yet. I was like, no. And then Pater got on there, and I was like, Pater, don't you make me cry. No. I'm glad Pater's alive. I'm glad he didn't die. I'm really glad, too, because they kind of, like, teased it in the last episode, and I was like, don't you dare show Pater among the dead. No. But yeah, Thorfinn's like, all I've ever wanted is a place that I would rather be in than being in death. And then he's like, we're going to create it. Now he's like, if that place doesn't exist, then I'll make it. And again, Attack on Titan. If the place you want doesn't exist, then go make it. I mean, I guess that's what's happening in that show, but just not the way Thorfinn would have done it, right? But yeah, I love it when he says, he's like, brother, come with me. I was like, I know. Every time I've shipped them in this series, everybody's been like, they're brothers. And I'm like, yes, I know. Just let me have this. One we can proudly tell Arnheid about. They just look so mature there. Like they've come so far. And Einar's damn deep voice where he's like, brother, I agree. I'll come with you. I was like, what? That deep voice where he's just sitting there like, yes, brother. Oh my God. And the shot of their hands, like with all the veins and the scars and the cuts and the cracked nails, everything for Arnheid. Like the calluses and everything. It just gets you, right? That they were like, we're going to make this place that Arnheid wanted to go to. She wanted that place that she could find peace in. We're going to make it for her. And that's what we're going to do. I'm glad Leif's like, well, damn it, it's about time. I'm glad. This whole season, I thought Leif was going to find Thorfinn, and he was going to die, and was never going to be able to get Thorfinn to come back home, and here we are. We're going back home. I guess we got one more episode, so I guess we could go back to Iceland, and that's where we could end it. I guess we could do that. I want more with Canute, but I don't know if they're going to give it to us. I feel like they've got to set up season 3 in the next episode. So having Thorfinn go back maybe to Iceland. We've not been there in 15 years. Oh my God. What's that going to be like? Is his mom going to be alive? What about his sister? Is she going to have a family? What is that going to be like? I guess we could set up like if Thorfinn does go home, what does he do after that, right? What do we do after that? And then we could go back to Canute and be like, what do we do? What does Canute do now? What's that going to be like? I don't know, right? But yeah, Snake. I'm really sad that Snake is stuck there. That Snake stayed there with Spherical. That old man ass was just too much to leave. No, I know that he's staying there because of his obligation. Humor me. I like to make y'all squirm with my Spherical and Snake ship. Or Roald. Roald and Spherical. Roald, son of Grimm. I feel like, was there also a son of Grimm in season 1? I feel like there was a son of Grimm in season 1. Was that a thing? For some reason, maybe it's just because Grimm is such a common word that it was sparking my memory, but I could have swore there was a son of Grimm in season 1. If it was Bjorn, I would laugh. Bjorn, son of Grimm. I don't think so. But Olmar, truly thank him. Olmar joined the fan club. He joined the congregation of the true warriors alongside Roald, son of Grimm. I love it. And Thorfinn's like, I figured out what I should do. I love the old man gives him credit. Like, old man gives him credit being like, you should thank me. I love it. And I love they didn't take any money. And then Snake gets like the little sparkles in his eyes. He's like, I'm Roald, son of Grimm. I love that. And I love that Thorfinn and Einar are like, We learned his name. Like, it was like the most wholesome damn thing in the world. The most wholesome. Like, they forged that bond with them. And it's like, they're the people of Kettle's Farm will forever sing the praises of Thorfinn and Einar, who saved their farm and like sent a king away. Like, that's gonna make an impression. People are gonna remember that. They're gonna start telling stories, right? And Pater watching Einar's grave, he about made me cry. It's like, how dare you? I don't feel bad for Kettle. I don't, but you know who I feel great about? Damn Olmar. Olmar looking sweet there with his hair down with the girl. I was like, you get your glow up, Olmar. That's right. You should have had that hair down all the way from the beginning. I like Olmar's glow up. He looks so good. Like, look at him. So proud of him. And then Thorgil, he's not taking it settling down. I like that they do the callback where they do carve it into your flesh, carve it into the land. My hands have been like that before, where they have like blisters on them from working with livestock. I get it. And then Thorgil, he like has his spear and he's gone. And right after that line, it says, carve it into your spoils, carve it into your enemies. Those lines there, you don't really apply to the land. That's applying to Thorgil. I love it. I love it. But then, yeah. And then I love the fact that all of the guys are working on Sverkel's farm, and even Snake's working there too, or Roald. I love that. He's like, I was just taking a break. I love it. And we get the close-up of Sverkel's hands. Carve what you feel into me. Right after Sverkel and Snake sit next to each other. I'm kidding. I won't torture you all anymore. But yeah, I love that. And then Pater. In my life, when he said I've always endured, and like his voice starts to break a little bit, I was like, Pater, don't you dare make me cry. It's like they're headed towards a world that we can never even imagine. Oh. I'm like, damn it, show. Damn it. So there's just a lot that happened this episode. An awful lot. I'm really surprised, although I'm very pleased that we got that all wrapped up with Canute as early as we did. That was nice. I'm glad that Canute is wooed by Thorfinn. I'm glad that he was. I was like, Canute, you didn't even see him when he was hot. Wait till you see him again, right? Wait till you see. So, I don't know. We have one more episode left. And we really have to, like, build up for a season 3. So, it's going to be curious to see what they show us and what we get. Like, what is Thorfinn's plan of action? What's he going to be doing? What's going to be happening? Are we going to get just Thorfinn and what happens with him? Are we going to get Canute? Are we going to get Thorgil? Are we going to get anybody else? I don't know. I'm sad. I can't believe I'm sad to leave the farm because we're leaving Olmar and Snake. I'm very sad to leave them as characters, and I hope maybe we'll come back to them. Maybe. We'll see. But if we don't, they were really good characters. I honestly, at the beginning, I loved the full circle that Olmar makes. He started out with the girl, like he was all like bragging about becoming a warrior, and he was like, thought that she was trying to like seduce him and like turned her away. And then it comes full circle where he becomes this farmer and like has her with him, like, you know, the things that matter more. And he seems like such a wholesome guy, and she's like, all right, cool, you're not a sleazeball, yeah, you know. And then Snake starts out as this big intimidating character, and by the end of it, he's a damn teddy bear, and it's like, ugh. So, no, I love it. I thought this episode was great. It wasn't quite as epic as 22, but how can you top that, right? So, I really love this episode. I'm so curious for next episode. If we go back to Iceland, I've waited since season 1 for this to happen. Oh, y'all. I guess we'll just have to wait and see. So, in any case, I'm curious to know your thoughts down below. I hope you enjoyed this reaction discussion. I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'll be back next week for, sadly, y'all, the season finale of season 2 of Vinland Saga. Bye!